Asynchronous session, the Unit 3 session. We are talking about the why today, author's purpose. And we are going to be focusing on being able to read a passage to determine author's purpose and to understand how the author's perspective affects the text. We are going to focus on the definition of purpose, how we identify different strategies to identify author's purpose and perspective, and then we are going to give it a try before we move on to our quiz. As you watch the lesson, you will be given different letters for the access code for the quiz. After you watch the video, you will progress to the quiz in the course. So the first access code letter is the letter K. So I'd like you to write that down, the letter K, and keep track of each letter as it said so that you can enter the whole word in at the end for the quiz. All right, so let's start by talking about this idea of purpose. What is purpose? Every author that sits down and writes something has a purpose for writing. This is the main idea he or she is writing the selection. He or she is trying to either inform you, persuade you, or entertain you. Now, those are all exactly how they sound. Inform, you will learn something from the selection. These are our manuals, our pamphlets, our news articles. These do not include opinion. This is just straight information that we are learning. To persuade, this is when the author will want you to believe his or her position. They're trying to get you to jump over to their side of the fence and believe as they do. This will contain both fact and opinion. Then the last is to entertain. The goal here is to tell a story and to entertain us. This is where, our narrative nonfiction or our fiction lies. People are trying to entertain us. And obviously we can also combine sometimes our purpose is to inform and then to persuade. Sometimes if we're reading nonfiction that's narrative in nature, we might also learn something from that text as well, but also be entertained. So you can combine purposes. For our practice today, we are just going to focus on identifying one purpose instead of multiple purposes. All right, so just some clues that we can look for. How do we know why something was written? Especially something that if it's written by an author that we cannot ask, if that author has passed on, we can't ask them. We might not know why something was written. We have to look for clues. So we're going to search the text for clues. These are 3 questions that I find helpful when I am looking to determine why something is written. What is the piece about? Number 1, can I just, if you can tell me, it's about changing my tire. Okay, excellent. So then I can tell for sure if it's just about changing a tire, then that author is probably trying to inform me. If it's about the importance of knowing how to change one's tire and that this should be a specific element in everybody's driver's education, it's persuasive. The person's trying to persuade that changing one's tire should be part of driver's education. The next question is, what is the author's attitude toward the subject? How does he or she feel about his or her subject? And this is where what word choice the author uses, helps us understand this attitude or this perspective of the author. So these are just 3 easy questions to keep track of when we're doing our reading for purpose. All right, before I move to the next slide, your next access code letter is I. Your next access code letter is I. So write that down next to the first letter that I gave you. All right, so let's take a look at this. Now this is just a little snapshot of just one paragraph. Now obviously if we're reading an entire piece of writing, it's going to be longer and it's going to have more detail in it. But this is just an example of what we can look for in this section and utilizing those 3 questions. So let's practice. Reading to one's child is a valuable part of early childhood education. Parents should read to their children every day starting at 6 months old. Research suggests that the earlier parents read to their children, the greater love for reading that child will hold. It is time to put down the remote and pick up the book. Okay, so what is this piece about? This piece is about reading to one's children early on, starting super early, age 6 months old. So that's the piece is about reading to one's child, right? What is the author's attitude toward this subject? Well, I am going to say, based on the word choices in the text, that the author thinks this is important. He or she says right here, the greater love for reading that child will hold the earlier they read to their kids. So I'm going to say that based on this statement right here, or I should say really the whole section, that this person agrees that reading to one's child is a valuable part of early childhood education. They use the word valuable here in the first sentence, which also tells me that they believe this to be a valid point and that they support this idea that the earlier we read to our children, the better readers or the more love they're going to hold for reading. So that's how I see just those two pieces of perspective and purpose. But now let's identify which category it falls into. Is it trying to inform us, persuade us, or entertain us? It's not entertaining us, and it is informing us because it does tell us that the research suggests. But this last line right here, oops, I moved that by accident, says it is time to put down the remote and pick up the book. This is what one calls a call to action. In this very last line of the paragraph, the reader tells us the author tells the reader what he or she would like us to do with this information. Put down that remote, stop watching TV, and pick up that book. Read to your child. So this purpose of this piece is to persuade us, if we have young children, to read to them earlier and than perhaps we would have. All right, take a look at this one too. Now this is just an example. If you are a video gamer, this is not indicative of personal opinion. Let's just keep that out there. Oh, before we move on to this section, your next access code letter is T, the letter T. So you should have 3 letters at this point. Your third letter is T. All right, one more time. Video games should be banned for children under 18 years old. There is a correlation between violent behavior and video games. Video games usage should be regulated for children under 18 years of age. So I ask you, before I tell you, what do you think? What is the tiny little paragraph about? What is the author's attitude towards the topic? And what word choices does he or she use to convey this attitude? Number 1, it's about video games and the correlation between violent behavior and video games, that the video game should be banned. So, topic, video games and its correlation to violent behavior and the banning of video games. Author's perspective or attitude is that video games should be banned. They are in agreement with this idea. And the third is that the word choice and identification to help me understand this are words like should be. This whole phrase, should be banned, tells me that this author holds strong opinion in regards to this position. And then again down here, should be regulated for children under 18 years of age. Now obviously this is a very tiny bit of a much larger piece of writing, but this does give us an indication of what this author believes and why he or she believes it. So we're going to go and say that the purpose of this piece is also to persuade. The purpose of this piece is to persuade us to regulate video game usage for children under the age of 18 years old, which would be very difficult to do, and perhaps a good topic if you're looking for a persuasive essay topic for your Unit 3, your persuasive essay. All right, so that resolves our Unit 3, ends our Unit 3 video. I'm going to give you your last letter of your access code is E, the letter E. So you should have 4 total letters. Now, when you go to enter the access code into the quiz, please remember that all of your letters are lowercase. Lowercase, there will never be any spaces. All lowercase, never any spaces. All right, if you have questions or need any assistance, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thanks so much.